in the people. Whereas if we're just like the folks over in Britain, for example, that disarm the society, then a small group of people can easily push them around.
Yeah, we heard an excellent argument last night from someone from Britain that said there's more guns in Britain now than when they made everyone disarmed. But they're in the hands of the wrong folks. Ed, one more comment.
Yeah. Big thing, just tell them why can't they have their local ordinances? Tell them to read what's going on in New York. As ridiculous as New York is, with their salt, their no smoking here, no smoking there, whatever the case may be. And if they don't get it, then they're too stupid to serve great government.
No, that's good. That's good. Those are really good arguments.
Whole sponsor, Evers,
House Bill 45, the sponsor is Negron. House Bill 517, the sponsor is Evers. Yeah, Ron?
Essentially, you're disabling all the local ordinances that don't mirror or match the state law regarding guns.
Correct.
Essentially, what does the state law say?
Yeah, the state law, does not allow tracking, tracing, registries. It actually makes some of those registries illegal if someone starts to compile registries from information they've incorrectly accessed. So we have great state laws, but they've moved a level down.
So does that mean county and city laws trump state law now?
Well, they don't, but what happens is, unless we expressly preempt it, which is what my bill does, you've got the damn Palm Beach, sheriff's office enforcing a local ordinance and arresting a guy for taking his gun to the grave of his son.
Where are they getting the money? Do they understand the cost of this? If you were saying, okay, only tracer bullets are allowed to be sold in this community, are they absorbing the cost of that, or are they talk to the manufacturers and say, okay, you can only ship them here? What happens if the guy comes into town, moves into town? I mean, it doesn't seem like they're looking past step one.
Well, this is Broward County, so I never suggested that they were good ideas. I want to move to the immigration question. I know Gene's going to cover this in greater detail, but many of you were here when we did a real in-depth workshop on immigration with this group. And so here's what I suggested. The Judiciary Committee, which I serve on, is the lead committee in the legislature to work on the immigration question. And what I suggested was, instead of just filing the Arizona bill, let's do in our committee a lot like what we did here at Panhandle Patriots, where we workshop through all the issues. And that way we end up with a bill that is well tailored to Florida. And we've begun that process in the Florida House. Here's what was said in the Judiciary Committee that was jaw-dropping to me by a Democrat from Miami. He said, if we have comprehensive immigration reform, it could lead to the terrible result of self-deportation, where people who are not here legally would leave.
Oh my God.
And I thought to myself, let's hope we have self-deportation. Let's hope we have a 100% success rate with self-deportation. But it would be funny if it weren't so tragic and if it weren't so expensive. But there are elected members of the legislature who legitimately believe that self-deportation would be a bad thing. Another Democrat member of the Judiciary Committee made this argument. She said, we have a $4.5 billion budget deficit. People who are here illegally help the economy. So let's keep them here and save the budget deficit. Here's why that's troubling. I thought, this is just a crazy person from South Florida. No one will listen to her. Right after she made those statements, the Florida Chamber of Commerce and the Associated Industries of Florida came out with the official position that illegal immigration is good for the Florida economy, even when we factor in healthcare costs, education costs, law enforcement costs, all the social services that we provide. And they are speaking as the unified voice of the business community in Florida, saying to us, the legislature, if we curb illegal immigration, it will hurt the economy. So, answers back to that. Clay.
My son-in-law, not long ago, had a landscaping business in Panama City. And he invested in equipment and spent a lot of time going out and drumming up clients and business and everything else to keep his young family going. He found out pretty quickly that no matter how hard he worked and how many jobs that he got, he couldn't compete with the other business people that were hiring illegal immigrants. And he wouldn't do it. And basically he got undercut and went out of business and had to sell his equipment at a loss. And now he's back in school and trying to put himself through school to get a degree to go do something else.
So the policy
Tell me
argument-
how that's good
Yeah.
for, you know, business that wants to adhere to the law of the land. I mean, you either got the law of the land and you've got legitimate business, or you got the Chamber of Commerce basically advocating illegal activity for what? For some other end purpose?
Yeah, well, they're
really don't
yeah.
understand.
I
where
think
they're
that it's a
coming
lot of
from.
agribusinesses that are members of those organizations that have funded them to be able to make those representations. But I think Clay's argument is this, and tell me if it resonates with the group, to merely analyze where illegal aliens are in the economy doesn't look at the whole picture. Because you have to look at who could fill those voids absent illegal immigration, and it would be people who are abiding by the rule of law. Is that distilled your argument? Yeah, Don?
Yeah, case in point, we just had a bust here. They were building up here for the Army up by Crestview here, and the contractor wasn't illegal, it turned out. Millions of dollars he was taking from the community here. He was providing social security numbers for his illegals to come in and work. Now, all those jobs could have been legal citizens.
Okay. Yeah.
Why is it that it has to be Hispanic illegal immigrants? You know, the Uniform Rule of Naturalization, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, a uniform rule for all. But yet we seem to want to have a special rule for Hispanic people only.
Well,
There are qualified people from, and there are probably some illegal East Europeans and everything else in the country that are very qualified to take a lot of jobs and to do a lot of jobs. But it seems like the only ones we seem interested in doing, and especially in the Miami community, would be Hispanic.
yeah. Well, let me ask you about these two specific elements real quick, and then I'll get to Eugene. One of the things that our chairman says is that to avoid looking like we favor racial profiling, so that we satisfy everyone's political sensitivities, instead of having an Arizona-style law that requires documentation for everyone that's pulled over for any reason, for a traffic citation of any kind, he would change the standard that you have to engage in not an administrative problem like speeding, but actual criminal conduct, like a DUI or leaving the scene of an accident or reckless driving. So he would raise the bar, if you will, the threshold to have to ask for that documentation as opposed to the Arizona law. So how do we feel about which of those is preferable? I said I'd get to Gene first.
Now you upset me so much, I forgot what my first statement was.
I don't mean to upset you. I'm just laying out the issues.
My comment, what Ed said, when I talk about illegals, I am not necessarily picking out Hispanics. And I don't believe any of our Tea Party recommendations are picking out Hispanics. For example, when we say that this many billion dollars is sent to Mexico, but then we also say, but this many $1 billion are sent worldwide from the United States. So I don't believe it's a matter of, I guess because Hispanics are so common here, that naturally that's what a lot of us think of. But I believe these bills cover all immigrants and all illegals.
No, it's a good point to continue to make because we get boxed in. But on the question of which threshold, every traffic stop or just those where you've engaged in criminal conduct as opposed to
Every traffic.
I just say, I have to produce
Sure.
identification of some sort, a registration,
But if someone's riding with you, they don't, right? That's really the question. If you got, so should they have to produce theirs at every traffic stop, or just where there's criminal
No,
conduct?
just where there's criminal conduct. If
Just where
they're
there's
sitting in the back, or
No,
sitting,
no, no, no.
if they, I mean, you're profiling at that point. You're pulling me over, I'm showing you identification, you're looking in the car, maybe Hispanic, maybe something else, and you're saying, oh, I need to see yours, for what reason? Was he driving?
Well, that is the argument that the chairman of the
If he was
committee makes.
driving,
Yeah. Ron?
If you keep raising the bar, eventually it's not going to mean anything anymore. You've got to set some standards and stick to them.
Yes, sir.
I got a problem with this immigration. I'm an immigrant myself. I immigrated from Canada, okay, but I had to go through immigration and so on. I think this immigration problem you're saying we have, which I agree you do have, is a crock. The reason why I say that, to immigrate from Canada, I had to prove my education, had to have X amount of dollars, a whole lot of money in the bank, okay? More than the average American citizen has. I had to have that in the bank. I had to prove that I had that money. I had to prove my education. I had to do all kinds of things to get into this country, and yet since I got here, I see all kinds of people getting here, okay? I had to prove that I had knowledge and skill not otherwise obtainable in the United States. Now you tell me that isn't an arrogant statement, but I had to prove that I had knowledge that they couldn't get here. And that's how I got here on a permanent visa.
But then why is immigration reform a crock?
Because all they have to do is impose the same rules to everybody, not just to Canadians. Just impose the same rules to Spaniards, to Italians, to French, to everybody, and they would stop. They'd have.
Yeah.
They'd stop that.
Well, let me stop you there. I apologize to you that I never want to be in Congress, and so I never want to have to make that decision, because the Constitution says that who comes here and by what standard is exclusively Congress's authority.
Federal?
Correct. But I don't think at the state level we ought to just sit back and absorb the negative consequences of illegal immigration. I think we ought to empower our law enforcement officials to be able to do stuff to curb the problem. And that is the essence of this legislation, and it really are a lot of the ideas that people in this room generated. And it's not going to impact what thresholds allow people to come here legally, but it will impact the thresholds of how involved the state will be in sending them back. Yes, sir.
It seemed that the biggest problem after the Arizona law was passed was making law enforcement, local law enforcement, immigration officers. Again, you do have to show ID if a crime is being, or suspected a crime. But to do more than that, I think you're stepping outside the boundaries. That was the biggest part of the whole Arizona law. Nobody complained about anything else. But that was the one. The cops became immigration officers. Now, unless there's a crime, you're getting back into that same boat again. And putting undue pressure on a cop already that has to deal with those issues.
No, that's the argument Al made, and
yeah.
the one our chair makes. Let me take a quick straw poll before I roll to the next issue, because I know Gene's going to cover this in far greater detail. But if you think that someone should have to produce documentation for every stop, doesn't have to rise to the level of criminal, even if you're speeding. Right? Let me see every stop. And now who's say only if there's some criminal activity.
Would they be stopped for? Aren't they stopped for criminal activity?
Well, no. If you speed, you haven't committed a crime. You've committed an administrative infraction. So those are two different things. Right? There's a difference between speeding and leaving the scene of an accident or reckless driving.
Robbing a bank.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So we're about 2/3, 1/3. That's helpful. It's helpful to see. Want to move to the next issue, and that is social service reform. I've talked about this issue with this group before. Something the governor ran on, and something I'm working with the governor on, and I'm going to file legislation to do this in the House of Representatives. I believe that anyone that shows up to the state of Florida wanting an unemployment check, a welfare check, food stamp checks, should have to take a drug test and pass it.
Amen.